Welcome to the Grad Life Podcast.
We're talking about all things grad.
And today, we're talking about navigating imposter syndrome for graduate students.
All right. Well, we are here today, and today has a special episode because we're talking about imposter syndrome for graduate students. And we have a guest here today, Ashley Beasley. Cough clap, cough clap. Ashley, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so hi everyone, my name is Ashley Beasley. I am a graduate assistant for Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging on Newman University's campus, and I am a third year clinical mental health counseling student.
All right. Can you describe or can you define imposter syndrome?
Yeah, so I think to be very simple, imposter syndrome is essentially when you walk into a space that you are qualified to be in and you feel like you're not qualified to be in it based on like maybe who's in there, based on like insecurity, based on could be a bunch of different things, but essentially you feel like you don't belong in a space where you are qualified to be in.
I think like graduate school itself is such an accomplishment to even start the process of going to grad school.
Mm-hmm.
And in my own experience, even like I think I've had a little bit of that imposter syndrome happen to me where it's like, do I deserve this? Like, am I good enough to even do this? Like the people that I've seen do this, they don't have the same academic record as me. A lot of the times they don't really look like me. So am I able to go ahead and go forth and conquer this and graduate? So I think it's important to kind of bring this topic to light, especially for grad students, because the grad student population is looking a little bit different now.
Yeah.
You know, we're younger going to grad school now sometimes. So it's like that's going to look a little bit different, and the confidence level might look a little bit different for those students coming into grad school.
And I think even students that are older too, that are doing a career switch, that they're so used to a certain life, and when they switch, they're like, do I feel like I'm in the right place still?
That's a good
I think
point.
that can still happen with older students as well. Being as though, like I've seen in my class, also being new to clinical mental health counseling, that we have a wide variety of students, some of which, you know, one was a videographer for 10 years and they're flipping the script. One was a teacher for 25 years and she's trying this out for the first time. So
Yeah.
I think there's a newness for everybody, you know.
Yeah.
So Ashley, my question to you is this something that you've ever dealt with or maybe going into clinical?
Yeah, so I actually graduated from Newman in 2022, and straight from undergrad, I went into graduate school. So at the time, I was 20. I graduated at 21, but by the time I started graduate school, I was 22. And I just felt like I was super young. Like to be 22 in graduate school just seemed bizarre to me. That seemed like something that wasn't normal. Not that it was bad, not that it was a cultural thing or a gender thing or anything like that. It just felt like such serious moves for such a young person. And so I definitely felt like my whole like first couple of weeks, I was like really just stressed out and wondering and questioning like, am I cut out for grad school? Is this something that I actually want to pursue? The night before classes started, I actually had all of my mentors on the phone because I was freaking out. I'm like, what is the first day of grad school? Like, are we happy? Are we sad? Is there something I need to do to prepare? Like, what exactly are we doing here? And that was like maybe the first semester. And then we did the first semester. We got through the first semester. And I was finally able to accept the fact that, like, okay, Ash, like, it's okay to be 22 in grad school. And you belong here because you wouldn't have gotten accepted into this program or had access to these opportunities had you not been ready or had you not been prepared for this moment.
Other than that, like what is something else that could trigger a person to have imposter syndrome?
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do sometimes with who you are around and like who you're intimidated by or who comes off as intimidating. So if I were to walk into a room or if I was to have an experience with a certain person and that person made me feel uncomfortable or made me feel like my entire being was not important, or the things that I had to say or what I thought, if that came off at any point in our relationship as unimportant or invaluable, I think that would contribute to someone feeling like an imposter or
Yeah.
feeling like they had to show up differently than who they authentically are.
Yeah. I think a lot of times too, like the term like code switching comes up a lot, like
Yeah.
because I often think a lot of people will try and code switch, and that could set off this imposter syndrome too. But sometimes, like you have different personalities for the different groups of people that you're around.
Yeah.
So you are in class, you might be a different type of person than you are when you're hanging out with your friends. So it's more or less just trying to figure out those different personalities for those different areas that you're in, but still staying authentically you in all
Yeah.
of that.
Hmm.
So I think with imposter syndrome, like you said, those little things that can trigger you, you just kind of have to remind yourself, like I'm still authentically me, and I'm still capable of doing this graduate program and
Yeah.
finishing.
Absolutely.
And in terms of triggers, like I think it's kind of hard to recognize, but what do you guys think about being able to tell the difference between what's stress and anxiety and what is an actual feeling of imposter syndrome?
Yeah. I think personally, like, imposter syndrome is being qualified to be in a space and feeling insecure while within the space because someone has made you feel a certain particular way. Someone or something has made you feel a particular way. But general anxiety could be like knowing you're qualified to be in that space, but still being scared or still being stressed out while in that space. So I think the difference, the main difference, at least from my understanding, is whether or not you feel qualified or you feel qualified. And qualified and still feeling scared comes with anxiety. But feeling unqualified and still being scared or feeling stressed out, that's imposter syndrome.
Would you say that there's any sort of like other warning signs or like actions that could follow like that those feelings of imposter syndrome that
Yeah.
differentiate from like symptoms of anxiety, for example?
Yeah, I think like embarrassment, like
Hmm.
being scared to speak up or feeling like you can't speak up, being embarrassed to show your face or to share your thoughts. I think those things could also contribute specifically due to like who's in the room. So like not sharing because of who's in the room or not sharing because you feel like you don't belong at this table. Like my thought is actually not important because I don't belong in this room. And that's, to me, from how I understand it or at least perceive it, that's very different than me not speaking up because I'm scared. If I'm scared, it doesn't matter who's in the room. I'm
Yeah.
not speaking up at all. But if it's imposter syndrome, it's like I'm not speaking up because I don't feel like I have space at this table to speak. And that's, yeah, that's my thoughts on that.
Earlier, you talked about the night before you went into grad school, you had a conversation with all of your mentors.
Hmm.
Can you talk about like how mentors can help you deal with imposter syndrome?
So my mentor was someone who worked in student affairs, and she had a very strong, well, I'm going to say I had a very strong attachment to her. She liked me as well, but like I feel like I was more connected than she was. But anyway, I literally called her or maybe texted her, something like that, the night before grad school, and I literally told her like what my struggle was. Like I'm scared. I'm about to break down and cry. And she was like, "Well, why are you scared? Like what's wrong? I don't really understand like what's going on." And I was just like, I feel like I'm too young, like I shouldn't be doing this right now. Like it seemed like the right decision over the summer. Everyone was applauding this choice over the summer, but here I am the night before grad school, and I no longer feel like this is the right choice. And she said, "This can't be the same Ashley that graduated with honors. This can't be the same Ashley that had all of these graduation cords around her neck and medals around her neck. And this can't be the same Ashley that the president of Newman University knows.
Yeah.
Like, she was just naming, like, all of these accomplishments that obviously qualified me to be in this position. And it kind of, like, quieted the thoughts in the back of my mind. It's like, Ash, like, relax. Like, you're going to be okay. And on the off chance that you're not okay, there's a whole community of people and family here rooting for you to make sure you're okay. And another reason why it was like a little bit of a shock for me to be in graduate school was the fact that I'm a first generation college student.
Mm-hmm.
So graduating from college, period, was already a like mind blowing
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
And then to be the first in my family to not only graduate but also obtain a master's degree, that was like another bizarre thing.
Yeah.
So it just felt like I was doing like a lot of earth shattering, groundbreaking things within my family or at least community that I think I just needed time and space to actually process that I can be this great of a person and all of these things can happen all at one time. And it is worth celebrating.
Yeah.
You know, it is worth acknowledging. And yeah.
Yeah, honestly, like, being in that situation, first generation student, one of the only people in your community doing something like this, that can be earth shattering. Like, you're like, what am I doing right now? What am I about to do?
Yeah.
And that also is setting the tone for people that are looking at you, older and younger. So
Yeah.
that creates another layer of pressure put on this. So it's like, okay, now I've gotten over the imposter syndrome, but now I need to get through this pressure that's happening of like, I need to do well because
Yeah.
people are looking at me.
Yeah.
So I guess the next follow-up question is, how can we manage the stress of imposter syndrome? How can we address any of those warning signs when we start to come into that feeling, getting into our line of work, whether it's counseling, nursing, physical therapy, you name it.
Yeah, I think the moment that you become or begin to feel insecure about whatever it is that you're doing, it is very important to have a team of people around you that are willing to like shake you up a little bit, like talk some sense into you and help you remember how truly great you are. I have a student. The student is very like an insecure person, but more so self-conscious. Like
Mm-hmm.
can come off as very confident, can come off as very much like I know what I'm doing, I know how to show up. But there's just like these little pockets of like insecurity or self-consciousness based on what people have told her in the past or like what people have done that make her feel like she can no longer show up in a space as her authentic self. And every time she comes to me with an insecurity or like with something she feels self-conscious about, I always say, it's you. Like you are the prize here. Like you have done everything and more in order to be in this space. If people didn't think that you were competent or if people didn't think that you were enough, you wouldn't have been chosen for this position.
Right.
So obviously it's something that you have. It's a skill that you have perfected or excelled in, or there are people here that applaud you and look highly toward you enough to elect you to be in the positions that you're in. You know the president, you're a part of Res Life, like you're a part of all of these things. There are people here who believe in you.
Wow.
So believe in yourself. And like those little pockets of like inspiration or like positivity really has the ability to kind of turn someone's mood and make them feel as though they are able to show up exactly who they are, opposed to having to hide behind the insecure version of themselves. So it just takes one person, honestly, to empower you, to let you know that you are loved, that you are important, that you were created specifically for things like this, to kind of ease your mind a little bit about feeling like you don't belong in certain spaces.
And this doesn't necessarily have to just come from a mentor, right? I mean, this could also just come from peers that we're working with,
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
How do you think you'd build a group of people, maybe outside of mentors even, but your peers, how would you build a peer to help be that motivation for you?
Yeah. It's a duplicate or maybe like reciprocal relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So there's going
Yeah.
to be moments where that friend might feel insecure, and it's a whole lot easier for us as people to uplift someone else. Like, I suck at this, but
Yeah.
you my girl, you are absolutely stunning. You
Yeah.
are amazing. It's very easy for us to feed into other people. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think how that community is created or becomes about is like naturally you do something for other people and people feel like, oh, they have to do something for you
Yeah.
too. So I think, like, of course, like that's not always how it goes, but I do think that that is how it begins. It starts from like that one moment where you made someone else feel important or you made someone else feel special, and now they want to feed into you
Yeah.
some way.
Yeah.
I think that's how the community is started.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, when people really um just like really enjoy you as a person, they'll be more willing to help you, to guide you throughout life, to push you, to lift you up. Like when people genuinely care about you as a person. So sometimes it's not necessarily anything you can do but be yourself.
Yeah.
And you simply being yourself will be what attracts other people to you.
Yeah.
What sort of advice would you give to grad students that could be currently dealing with imposter syndrome entering their field?
Yeah, honestly, this is going to suck because it's terrible advice. If somebody told me this, I would be like, what? Breathe. It would simply be to breathe, to go outside, go for a walk, refocus, like your thoughts, focus on who you are as a person for a moment or two, and just breathe and realize, come to the conclusion eventually that you are exactly where you need to be.
Mm-hmm.
Like maybe you wanted to do this later in life, maybe you wanted to do it sooner, and for whatever reason, you're doing it right now. So breathe, hold your chin up, hold your head held high, and walk into the spaces that you are called to be in.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think being able to sit and soak in that emotion is so important. And I like how you said too, whether it was too soon or what did you say, too, or later?
Yeah, we're either early or it happened at like just like a different time period.
Because it can feel overwhelming in that moment, whether you thought you were ready or should have waited, either or.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice.
I would agree. Like I think breathing kind of gives you so much clarity in your brain. Like literally the oxygen moving through your body is opening up those brain cells and those brain waves to be able to think like, okay, like I can get through this. But also you start to remember what you've already done
Yeah.
and what you've already gotten through and what you've already succeeded at. So just like how your mentor had to remind you of all those excellent things that you've done already, in those moments that you're taking that deep breath, like think about that and then go back in there and say, I can do this. I can
Yeah.
continue doing this.
Yeah.
How would you balance striving for excellence with being kind to yourself and recognizing your accomplishments?
Yeah. I think it comes with honestly just like a lot of patience, right? So essentially, I started looking at myself as like a baby adult, and I'm a bring it
Baby
home.
adult. I like
I'm gonna
that.
bring it home for you. So when I was in college, obviously, like I turned 2021, right towards the end of undergrad, and I read this post. I actually saw the post again recently, but I saw this post a couple years ago. And it was like, when you are 20, when you are 21, 22 years old, you have only technically been an adult, I guess, for 1 to 2 years. If you're 20, not even a year. If you're 21, a year. If you're 22, you have 2 years where you've actually entered adulthood to some capacity. And you wouldn't expect a 0 year old
Yeah.
to know how to walk or to
Right.
know how to feed themselves or to know how to pick out their outfits or to know how to pay bills. You wouldn't expect that from a 1 year old
Yeah.
or a 0 month year old or even like a 5-year-old, right? So part of this showing up with like this excellent mindset is to be patient with yourself in the learning process, right? There are certain things that are developmentally appropriate because technically no one is fully developed, no female at least. I can speak from my perspective. Is not developmentally put together until the age of 25.
When that frontal lobe
Yeah,
develops.
well, it fully, gets together. So technically, like even now I'm 24, like technically my brain hasn't even reached its maximum capacity. It's like my brain isn't even fully here yet. Why am I trying so hard?
Right.
So it's like just being patient with yourself and knowing that like when you are ready and when the time comes, like those two things have to align. Like when you are ready and when the time presents itself, you will be okay and everything will work out and it'll be seamless, right? There are going to be moments where like you might feel like you're ready, but then the time is not here. So then it's not going to happen. And there might be times where the opportunity might present itself, but maybe you're hesitant or you're not as brave yet or you're not as strong yet. And so then the opportunity misses itself. Yeah. But there's going to be that perfect moment in time where you are mature or I am mature and the opportunity also comes and we are able to now like come together and pursue that particular dream, that particular goal. Sometimes it's like the right thing, wrong timing.
Yeah.
I'm starting to get the impression that imposter syndrome can be something that becomes worth going through to the extent that when we can grow from it, I think that we can. Um, hold on, let me reword this. It seems like going through imposter syndrome is part of our growth process. And man, I don't know how I'm going to word this.
Wow. I like that first sentence you said.
Yeah.
It's a part of our growth process.
Yeah.
I guess I can talk on that for a second. You didn't say much, but what you did say, I can speak on a little bit. It's like I feel like in order to fully grow, there has to be moments in time where you feel like you cannot do this. Like, have you ever heard of the quote? It's like if your dreams don't scare you, then you're not dreaming big enough.
Yeah.
If you walk into a space and you always felt comfortable, you always felt like you belonged in that space, then what?
Yeah. There's no challenge.
There's no challenge.
Yeah, and are you really learning from yourself?
Yeah, you're not learning, you're not growing. Because if you're the smartest person in the room, what exactly is happening on your personal self growth and self development and self achievement? So I guess to an extent, it is, I think to some extent, it is okay to feel like you don't belong in a space because that sense of not belonging produces a seed for growth. Yeah. But when there's people in the room that make you feel as though you are inadequate to be in that space, that's what's like, that's
Right.
what's like not
Right.
good about imposter syndrome. We shouldn't be making people feel like they don't belong. Right. But it's also natural to feel like sometimes you don't belong.
Yeah. That's where it becomes important to have those mentors, to have those peers, to have those little people in the room that are bigger than the people that are trying to make you feel like you don't belong.
And then there's also the whole idea of like representation. Like once you enter a space that people thought you didn't belong in before, you then open a door of opportunities for other people who look like you or maybe practice the same religion as you or maybe come from the same community as you or maybe come from the same, maybe you are the product of like two moms or maybe you were raised by grandparents or maybe you were adopted. Like whatever your story is, once you enter a space where people thought like, oh, I don't belong here, you automatically represent all of these other people that then give them insight or them give them the courage to also walk into spaces because their experience, even if they feel like they don't belong, their experience most certainly does.
Yeah.
And so that's the important part about imposter imposter syndrome. Maybe you don't belong here, but everything that you've been through, all the people who have fed into you, they absolutely deserve to be shown up for in this space right now. Obviously, I'm in the clinical mental health program. I'm training to be a therapist. And there was definitely a moment in the beginning of like the practicum class where I was like, and for those who aren't familiar, like the practicum class is where like you actually start seeing clients. You actually start practicing to be a therapist. So for me, my first 2 years was rooted in coursework. We did coursework on multicultural counseling. We did spirituality work. We did marriage and family. We did group process. Like we've done like the coursework or like the textbook work of being a therapist. That was my first 2 years. And so once I reached the practicum stage, it was like the point where I actually started to see clients and try to help them with their lives. So in my population that I like working with, I always say, is anybody under 25? Well, I'm 24. So I'm anybody under 25. So what exactly can I tell another 24-year-old about their lives that I'll actually believe enough to maybe practice a little bit in my life? Or what exactly can I tell a 25-year-old from a 24-year-old perspective that will actually help them want to change something in their lives, to help them do something differently or help them see things from a different perspective? So it wasn't until recently. So earlier this year, I was in the practicum stage. Currently, I'm in the internship 2 stage. And it wasn't until like this semester, my first presentation, where I was like, I actually think I'll be a quality therapist one day. Not because I gave good advice or because I told a client what to do and they actually did it, but because I was willing to be patient and to grow with the client, to ask them questions that will stimulate reflection and ultimately help them come up with what the answer to solving the issues in their life would ultimately be. So it has nothing to do with me being 24 or me not being 25 yet. It's the fact that I am able to welcome people into a space or welcome people into my energy and allow them to simply be who they are, knowing that I don't have to have the answers for anyone. One of my clients, her and I are literally going through the same exact thing. She's a little bit younger. She's 21. I'm 24. But we were going through the same exact thing at the same exact time. And quite frankly, I had no advice to give her. The only thing that I could do was ask questions to help her reflect on what she thought was best for her in that decision. How I handled my situation was completely different than how she handled hers. And mine worked for me, and the way she handled it worked for her. And that was okay. And that's the moment where I knew, like, okay, despite the insecurity, despite feeling too young or being too this or being too that, whatever it was that I was creating in January at the time, despite all of that stuff, I was able to get to a point where I am able to simply hold space for a client and them be able to do whatever it is they need to do with the things that we talk about. And that's when I felt like, okay, I'm no longer an imposter in the therapy realm. Like I actually belong here.
You're not always gonna know. Like nothing is gonna be textbook. Like life is not textbook.
Mm-hmm.
You can't sit there and be like, "Am I doing this right? Am I doing this wrong?" Sometimes you have to go in there and think on the spot, like what's gonna happen, and then from there you learn from that.
Yeah.
You learn from those lessons to either do better, to do exactly the same, but you're not gonna do worse. Like that's one thing that you have to keep in mind. It's not gonna get worse than where it is right now.
Yeah.
So you can only grow from that experience.
What about any students that could be coming to terms with just the academia in itself, just like the rigor of the grad school work, and trying to schedule that in? You know, when I think of some of the students that are you know, have been out of school for a long time and they're coming back to it, and they could be having some imposter syndrome just with trying to get their work done in grad school. What sort of advice would we have for them that are just trying to, you know, keep up with the pace of, you know, coming back to school, and whether or not they feel like they're in the right place because of any struggle they could be having with just doing their schoolwork.
I think that's honestly that's almost every grad student, right? Like
Yeah,
every person has a life out of grad school
yeah,
that they're dealing with. So it's like trying to create that area of space where you can say like I'm doing my grad work this night, I'm dealing with my family stuff this night, and then like getting out of your own head a little bit to say like I can do this, all of this, and make it possible.
right.
Yeah. I'm also willing to bet that every graduate student has definitely had a moment where they had to choose between school and something
Yeah.
else that they love.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
So for me, the internship, I also work with kids. I currently work at KinderCare, but I also used to work at the Goddard. Why not, right?
yeah,
Like life is very serious, but with kids, it's like it's still serious, but not as much, right? We
yeah.
get to play
It's
a
a
little
different type of
more.
seriousness. Yeah.
Yeah. So I had to choose. I went to my supervisor one day, and I literally told him, "Listen, I cannot do this internship and succeed at school and be here. I had to make a choice. I walked away from money. I walked away from the experience of simply having fun every day. I walked away from, the opportunity of learning and growing in the education field, which are all things that I am very interested in doing. And I had to be realistic and think for a second, like, do you want to graduate in 2025 or do you want this money now?
Yeah.
Which one is more important?
That's a
And
hard
which one are you
decision.
willing to sacrifice for?
Yeah,
I really want to be done school in 2025.
right.
I really would like to be 24 years old with a master's degree.
Wow.
That is way more important. It's not even that it's more important. It's just, it's important right now in this moment. And because it's important right now in this moment, whatever career that I choose to actually pursue when I'm 25, I'll be able to show up better because I have a master's degree at 24. And so it's about like, what are you willing to sacrifice?
Because it could be the flip for somebody else where it's like in that moment money is more important, they need to survive.
Yeah, money is what's going to keep me
Absolutely,
alive.
right.
Yeah,
Right,
money
yeah.
is going to take care of my kid. Money
Mm-hmm.
is going to, and it's not that it's not that the master's degree is any less important. It's just this is what is needed for right now.
Mm-hmm.
This is where my focus needs to be for right now, and that's valid.
Yeah, and that's up to you as a person to decide that.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to say thank you, Ashley, for coming on, talking about this very important topic.
Yeah, no problem.
That I think people, it's becoming more of a thing now. Like people are talking about it a little bit more. But honestly, I never heard of imposter syndrome until like maybe a year or two ago. Like I felt it, but I never actually heard what it was and like could define it.
Mhm.
So I think it's great that we have you on here today, just kind of explaining that, and specifically for graduate students in that stage of life, because a lot of times it can hit a lot of us, and we don't even realize it.
Absolutely.